In the quiet of a suburban kitchen, Clara left her cancer diagnosis on the table, a stark white report, its edges crisp, screaming truths no one would hear. As the clock ticked and her family's voices echoed demands through the house, she stood unseen, a ghost in her own life, her fingers trembling with the weight of a choice, to stay invisible or to shatter the silence forever. The kitchen table was a battlefield of neglect, strewn with unopened mail, a half-eaten apple, and a coffee mug with a lipstick stain that wasn't Clara's. At its center, like a silent grenade, lay the medical report. Its edges were crisp, the hospital's logo stark against the white paper, but no one had touched it. Clara stood in the doorway, her fingers tracing the worn hem of her sweater, her breath shallow. She'd left it there deliberately, visible, undeniable, hoping someone would notice. Hoping someone would ask. The clock on the wall ticked, each second a small betrayal. Outside, the autumn dusk bled orange across the suburban lawn, casting long shadows through the window. Clara's hazel eyes, dulled by fatigue, lingered on the report. Stage 2 breast cancer. The words felt like a foreign language, heavy and unreal. She moved to the sink, her movements mechanical, washing dishes that weren't hers. The clink of porcelain against porcelain was a rhythm she knew too well, decades of dinners, school lunches, birthday cakes. Her hands, rough from years of scrubbing, trembled as she set a plate in the rack. She was 66, and her body had begun to betray her, but the family hadn't noticed. Not James, with his late nights at the law firm, nor the children, Daniel, Anna, Leona, who still treated the house like a hotel. Clara's role was invisible, her sacrifices woven into the fabric of their lives like thread no one saw until it frayed. She glanced at the report again, her chest tightening. Would they care? The thought was a blade, sharp and cold. Flashbacks came unbidden, vivid as photographs. Clara at 35, packing lunches while James kissed Vivian goodbye at the airport. Vivian, his first wife, whose absence had left a void Clara was expected to fill. Clara at 40, driving Leona to ballet, her own dreams of painting tucked away like old canvases in the attic. Clara at 50, managing rental properties to secure the family's future, her art degree a distant memory. Each memory was a weight, pressing against her ribs. She'd given everything, her youth, her ambition, her voice, and yet, here she was, standing in a kitchen that felt like a stranger's, waiting for someone to see her. The front door slammed, jarring her from her thoughts. Daniel's voice boomed through the house, impatient. "Mom, where's dinner? I'm starving." He was 32, a financial analyst with a condo downtown, but he still showed up for meals, expecting Clara to serve. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her lips pressing into a thin line. "It's in the oven," she called, her voice steady despite the storm inside. Anna and Leona followed, their chatter filling the air, work, boyfriends, plans for the weekend. No one asked about her day. No one noticed the report. Clara's fingers curled into fists, her nails biting into her palms. She wanted to scream, to shatter the silence, but the words lodged in her throat like stones. Dinner was a cacophony of clinking forks and half-hearted complaints. "The chicken's dry," Leona said, pushing her plate away. Anna scrolled through her phone, oblivious. James, home late as usual, loosened his tie and muttered about a case. Clara sat at the table's edge, her plate untouched. She watched them, these people she'd built her life around, and felt like a ghost. When did I disappear? The question gnawed at her, relentless. She'd missed dinner last night, her first absence in years, after a hospital visit, and the family's response had been swift, irritation, not concern. "You could have called," James had said, his tone clipped. Daniel had grumbled about ordering pizza. No one had asked why she was late. The meal ended, and the family scattered, Daniel to the living room, Anna and Leona to their phones, James to his study. Clara cleared the table alone, the report still untouched. Her reflection in the kitchen window was a stranger's, graying hair pulled into a messy bun, shadows under her eyes, a face etched with quiet resignation. She pressed a hand to her chest, where the cancer lived, and felt a surge of defiance. "I'm still here." But the house didn't care. It hummed with its own rhythm, indifferent to her pain. Later, Clara stood at the bus stop, the evening air sharp against her skin. The street was alive with headlights and distant laughter, but she felt untethered, like a leaf caught in the wind. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, James, probably, asking where she'd put his cufflinks. She ignored it. The bus arrived, its doors hissing open, and she stepped inside, the crowd swallowing her. Faces blurred around her, a teenager with earbuds, an old man clutching a newspaper, a young woman with kind eyes who offered her a seat. Clara declined, gripping the pole as the bus lurched forward. Her gaze drifted to the window, where her reflection flickered against the city lights. The report was still on the table, a silent cry no one had heard. And in that moment, swaying with the bus's rhythm, Clara felt the first stirrings of something new, anger, raw and unyielding, whispering that she deserved more. The morning light sliced through the blinds, casting jagged stripes across the living room where Clara sat, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. The house was quiet now, its chaos dormant, but the silence felt like a held breath, tense and fragile. Her gaze drifted to the coffee table, where the medical report still lay, its edges curling slightly from the humidity. 2 days had passed since she'd left it there, a deliberate act of vulnerability, and still, no one had touched it. The neglect was a wound, festering beneath her skin, and yet Clara couldn't bring herself to move it. Let it sit, she thought, her jaw tightening. Let it scream what I can't. Her fingers tightened around the mug, the porcelain warm against her palms, grounding her against the vertigo of her unraveling life. She rose, her movements slow, deliberate, as if testing the weight of her own existence. The kitchen smelled of last night's garlic and regret. Clara opened the fridge, her eyes scanning the shelves, half a lemon, a carton of milk, a bowl of grapes she'd washed for Anna, who never ate them. She reached for the grapes, then stopped, her hand hovering. Why do I keep doing this? The question was a spark, igniting memories of 1,000 small sacrifices, restocking fruit, ironing James's shirts, scheduling Leona's dentist appointments. Each task was a thread in the tapestry of her invisibility, woven so tightly she'd forgotten where she began. She shut the fridge door, the sound sharp in the stillness, and leaned against the counter, her breath uneven. The cancer was a quiet passenger in her body, but this erasure, was a louder pain. Flashbacks flickered, unbidden, like old film reels. Clara at 28, meeting James at a gallery opening, his charm a spotlight that made her feel seen. She'd been a painter then, her canvases bold with color, her dreams vivid. But Vivian's shadow loomed, even then, James's first wife, the elegant dancer who'd left him for Paris, leaving Clara to step into a role she hadn't auditioned for. Clara at 30, selling her easel to buy Daniel's crib. Clara at 45, overhearing James on the phone, his voice soft with longing as he spoke Vivian's name. Each memory was a stone in her chest, heavy with the weight of choices she'd mistaken for love. Now, at 66, she saw them for what they were, surrenders. The front door creaked, and Anna's voice cut through the quiet. Mom, have you seen my charger? She breezed into the kitchen, her hair a messy bun, her eyes glued to her phone. Clara's lips parted, a reflex to answer, but she stopped herself. Let her look. Anna rummaged through drawers, oblivious to Clara's stillness. God, this place is a mess, she muttered, tossing a dish towel aside. Clara's gaze hardened. A mess you never clean. The thought was a rebellion, small but fierce. Anna left without a glance, and Clara's heart twisted, not with guilt, but with clarity. Her children didn't see her, they saw a function, a machine that ran their lives. James appeared next, his briefcase in hand, his tie slightly askew. Clara, I'm late. Where's my travel mug? His tone was clipped, distracted, as if she were an assistant, not a wife. She pointed to the counter, her voice flat. There. He grabbed it, pausing to frown at her. You okay? You've been off lately. The question was perfunctory, a box to check. Clara's pulse quickened, her mind screaming, the report is right there. But she only nodded, her throat tight. Fine. James left, the door clicking shut, and Clara felt the house settle around her, its walls closing in. He didn't even look at me. The realization was a fracture, splitting her heart open. Later, at the grocery store, Clara pushed a cart down the aisle, her movements automatic. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on cans of soup and boxes of cereal. She reached for James's favorite coffee, then froze, her hand trembling. Why am I still choosing him? The question was a tidal wave, crashing through years of habit. She set the coffee back, her breath hitching. A woman nearby glanced at her, curious, but Clara turned away, her eyes burning. She abandoned the cart in the aisle, its wheels squeaking faintly, and walked out into the parking lot, the autumn air sharp against her face. The world felt too loud, too bright, and yet she was a shadow within it, unseen. The bus ride home was a blur of faces and murmurs. Clara sat by the window, her reflection a ghostly overlay on the city's rush. She thought of Vivian, elegant, untethered, the woman James had never stopped loving. Clara had spent decades trying to fill that void, but now, with cancer carving its mark inside her, she saw the futility. I've been chasing a ghost. Her fingers traced the edge of her scarf, a nervous habit, and she felt a shift, subtle but seismic. She was detaching, not from the family, but from the version of herself that had served them. The bus jolted, and she missed her stop, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold, and Clara let herself drift, untethered, into the unknown. The dining room was a theater of discord, its long oak table cluttered with half-empty plates and the detritus of a meal gone cold. Candlelight flickered, casting trembling shadows on the wallpaper, but the warmth was a lie. Clara stood at the head of the table, her hands clasped tightly, her knuckles pale as bone. The air was thick with the scent of roasted lamb and resentment, the family's voices a jagged chorus of demands and complaints. Daniel stabbed at his potatoes, muttering about a delayed flight. Anna snapped at Leona for hogging the wine. James, his jaw tight, checked his watch, already half gone to some late meeting. Clara's chest ached, not from the cancer, but from the weight of their indifference. She was a prop in their play, essential but unseen, and tonight, she would rewrite the script. She cleared her throat, a small sound that felt like a detonation. I need to say something. Her voice was steady, but it trembled at the edges, a violin string stretched to breaking. The family paused, forks hovering, eyes flicking to her with mild annoyance. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. This is it. She straightened, her gaze sweeping the table, taking in the faces she'd loved, served, and lost herself to. I'm done, she said, the words sharp as glass. I'm no longer your unpaid domestic help. The silence that followed was a living thing, heavy and stunned, pressing against her skin. Daniel laughed, a short, incredulous bark. What's that supposed to mean, Mom? You're joking, right? His eyes, so like James's, glinted with dismissal. Anna leaned forward, her brows knitting. You can't just stop. Who's going to handle everything? Leona's lips parted, but no words came. She clutched her wineglass like a lifeline. James set his napkin down, his expression a mask of controlled irritation. Clara, this is dramatic. If you're overwhelmed, we can hire someone. His tone was patronizing, a lawyer soothing a difficult client. Clara's hands trembled, but she didn't falter. You don't get it, she said, her voice rising, raw with years of swallowed pain. I'm not overwhelmed. I'm invisible. And I'm leaving. The word leaving landed like a thunderclap. Anna's face crumpled, not with grief but with panic. You can't just walk out. What about us? Her voice was shrill, a child's plea cloaked in adult entitlement. Daniel leaned back, crossing his arms. This is ridiculous. You don't even work, Mom. What else are you going to do? The barb pierced, but Clara's resolve was iron. She thought of the report, still untouched on the coffee table, a silent witness to their neglect. They don't deserve my truth. She met Daniel's gaze, her eyes blazing. I'm going to live, she said, the words a vow, a blade, a liberation. Upstairs, Clara packed with deliberate care, her movements a quiet rebellion. The bedroom was a museum of her sacrifices, James's cufflinks on the dresser, Anna's old ballet shoes in the corner, a photo of Daniel's graduation she'd framed. She ignored them all, choosing only essentials, a few clothes, her passport, a worn sketchbook from her art school days. Her fingers lingered on the sketchbook's leather cover, its pages filled with dreams she'd buried. Not anymore. She zipped the bag shut, the sound final, like a door locking. Downstairs, the family's voices rose and fell, a storm she no longer belonged to. She glanced at the mirror, her reflection unfamiliar, gray hair loose, eyes fierce, a woman reclaiming herself. A memory surfaced, sharp and vivid, Clara at 30, sitting in a bank, signing papers for their first rental property. She'd built a small empire of investments, a safety net no one acknowledged. That money was hers now, a lifeline she'd woven in the shadows. She slipped her wedding ring off, setting it on the dresser with a soft clink. It felt like shedding a skin, painful but necessary. The house creaked around her, as if protesting her departure, but Clara was already gone, her heart crossing a threshold she couldn't see. She left without goodbyes, the front door closing softly behind her. The night air was crisp, scented with fallen leaves and possibility. Clara's breath clouded in the darkness as she walked to the bus stop, her bag light on her shoulder. The city hummed in the distance, a symphony of lights and lives. She boarded a bus to the airport, her destination unclear but her purpose crystalline. At the terminal, she booked a flight to a coastal resort she'd once seen in a magazine, lush, extravagant, a world away from her kitchen's confines. As the plane ascended, Clara turned off her phone, the screen going dark like a curtain falling. Below, the city shrank, and with it, the woman she'd been. She closed her eyes, the hum of the engines a lull renovated into freedom. The resort's balcony was a sanctuary of salt air and sunlight, its wrought iron railing warm under Clara's fingertips. Below, the ocean churned, a restless expanse of turquoise and foam that mirrored the tumult in her heart. She stood barefoot, her cotton dress fluttering in the breeze, a mug of chamomile tea cradled in her hands. The world felt vast here, unmoored from the suffocating rhythm of her old life. 3 days had passed since her flight, and Clara was still learning to breathe without the weight of expectation. Her phone, powered off, lay buried in her suitcase, a relic she wasn't ready to unearth. Let them wonder, she thought, her lips curving faintly. For the first time in decades, her time was her own, and the freedom was both exhilarating and terrifying. She set the mug down and wandered into the room, her gaze catching on the sketchbook she'd unpacked last night. Its leather cover was worn, the pages yellowed, but it called to her like a forgotten friend. Clara hesitated, her fingers hovering over it. Can I still do this? The question was a whisper, laced with doubt. Painting had been her soul's language once, before marriage and motherhood had silenced it. She opened the book, her breath catching at the sight of her old sketches, bold lines, vibrant swirls, a young woman's dreams captured in charcoal. Her chest tightened, not with pain but with longing. She grabbed a pencil, its weight unfamiliar, and began to draw, a tentative curve, then another. The lines were clumsy, but they were hers, and that was enough. The coastal city beyond the resort was a tapestry of color and chaos. Clara explored it daily, her sandals slapping against cobblestone streets, her eyes drinking in the vibrancy of market stalls and street musicians. One afternoon, she paused at a cafe, its tables spilling onto the sidewalk. As she sipped an espresso, a familiar face appeared, the young woman from the bus, the one with kind eyes who'd offered her a seat weeks ago. Clara, the woman said, her voice warm with surprise. Clara blinked, startled. I'm Grace, the woman continued, sliding into the chair opposite. I saw you on the bus, looking lost. Clara's throat tightened. Lost. The word was a mirror, reflecting a truth she hadn't named. Grace, a freelance writer in her 30s, became an unexpected anchor. Over coffee, Clara shared fragments of her story, not the cancer, not yet, but the weight of her family's neglect, the escape to this sunlit haven. Grace listened, her eyes bright with empathy, and offered practical help, a contact for a local caregiver, a lead on a small apartment nearby. "You don't have to do this alone," Grace said, her hand brushing Clara's. The gesture was a lifeline, pulling Clara from the isolation she'd worn like armor. She nodded, her voice soft. "Thank you." The words felt inadequate, but Grace's smile was a bridge, connecting Clara to a world that still held kindness. Back at the resort, Clara painted. She bought cheap watercolors from a market stall, their pigments vivid but unpredictable, and set up on the balcony. Her first attempts were awkward, colors bleeding into muddy chaos, but she persisted. Each stroke was a reclamation, a defiance of the years she'd spent erasing herself. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, she painted the ocean, a swirl of blues and golds, raw and unpolished. Her hands shook with exhilaration, her heart pounding. "This is me." She posted a photo of the painting online, a whim born of courage, and woke to a handful of likes, then dozens. Strangers left comments, bold, soulful, and Clara stared at the screen, tears pricking her eyes. She wasn't invisible here. Memories of her art school days surfaced, vivid and bittersweet. Clara at 20, laughing with classmates in a cluttered studio, her hands stained with oil paint. Her professor, a wiry man with wild hair, had called her work fearless. She believed him then, but life had taught her to shrink, to prioritize others' dreams. Now, at 66, she felt that fearlessness stirring, fragile but fierce. She painted daily, her balcony a riot of drying canvases, each one a step toward herself. Grace visited often, bringing wine and stories, and their laughter filled the air, a sound Clara hadn't known she could make. One night, as stars glittered above the ocean, Clara sat on the balcony, a finished canvas at her feet. It was her best yet, a stormy seascape, all jagged waves and bruised skies, her pain and power woven into every stroke. Her phone buzzed, forgotten in her pocket, and she pulled it out, hesitating. Notifications from her art account glowed, more followers, a message from a local gallery. She smiled, her heart swelling, but the joy was tempered by a deeper truth. This is only the beginning. She powered the phone off again, her gaze returning to the sea. The horizon was endless, and Clara, for the first time, felt like she could reach it. The city's autumn festival pulsed with life, its streets awash in lanterns and the smoky scent of roasted chestnuts. Clara stood at the edge of the crowd, her scarf loose around her neck, her breath catching at the sight before her. On a makeshift stage, James and Vivian danced, a waltz, fluid and intimate, their bodies swaying as if time had never parted them. Vivian's silver hair gleamed under the lights, her smile radiant, while James's hand rested on her waist, his face softened by a tenderness Clara hadn't seen in years. Her heart stuttered, not with jealousy but with clarity. This is who he's always wanted. The realization was a quiet blade, slicing through the last threads of her denial. In Vivian's hand, a key glinted, Clara's house key, unmistakable. The betrayal was a weight, pressing her ribs until she could barely breathe. She'd returned to the city for a hospital appointment, not for them. The coastal resort had been a cocoon, but reality demanded her presence, if only briefly. Clara moved through the festival, her steps deliberate, her eyes scanning the crowd for Grace, who'd promised to meet her. The air was thick with laughter and music, but Clara felt like a specter, drifting through a world that no longer claimed her. Her fingers brushed the strap of her bag, where her latest sketch rested, a talisman of her new self. "I'm not theirs anymore." The thought was a spark, steadying her as she approached the house she'd fled. The front door creaked, a sound that once meant home but now felt like an intrusion. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of neglected laundry and takeout. Clara paused in the living room, her gaze landing on the coffee table. The medical report was gone, replaced by a stack of magazines. They threw it away. The realization was a punch, stealing her breath. She clenched her fists, her nails biting into her palms, and moved to the kitchen. Anna was there, scrolling on her phone, a mug of coffee cooling beside her. Mom? Anna's voice was sharp, startled. You're back. The question held no warmth, only accusation, as if Clara's absence was a personal slight. I'm not staying, Clara said, her voice low, resolute. Anna's eyes narrowed, but before she could speak, James entered, his suit rumpled, his expression guarded. Clara. He said her name like a formality, his gaze flicking to the door as if expecting Vivian. Clara's throat tightened. I saw you, she said, the words spilling out, raw and unfiltered. With her. At the festival. You gave her my key. James froze, his jaw tightening, but he didn't deny it. The silence was a confession, louder than words. Anna stood, her phone clattering to the counter. What's going on? She demanded, but Clara ignored her, her eyes locked on James. I want a divorce, she said, the words a thunderclap, final and unshakable. The room erupted. Anna's voice rose, shrill and panicked. You can't do this. What about us? The house? Daniel appeared, drawn by the noise, his face a mask of disbelief. A divorce? Mom, you're being insane. Leona lingered in the doorway, her eyes wide, her silence a different kind of judgment. James stepped forward, his voice measured, lawyerly. Clara, let's talk about this rationally. But Clara saw the truth in his eyes, not shock, but fear of losing control, of her rewriting their story. They're not grieving me, she realized, her heart twisting. They're scared of what they'll lose. The house, the money, the illusion of a perfect family, it was all a transaction, and she was done paying the price. She turned to leave, but Daniel blocked her path, his voice low, urgent. Think about what you're doing. The will, the properties, don't throw it all away. The mention of money was a slap, revealing his priorities. Clara's laugh was brittle, a sound she didn't recognize. You think this is about money, she said, her voice rising, fierce. This is about me. My life. I'm done being your servant. She pushed past him, her bag swinging against her hip, and stepped into the night. The street was quiet, the festival's distant hum a faint echo. Grace waited at the corner, her presence a balm. You okay? She asked, her eyes searching Clara's face. Clara nodded, her throat tight. I will be. As they walked away, Clara's mind churned. She saw James and Vivian's dance, the key in Vivian's hand, the family's cold pragmatism. Each image was a stone, heavy but no longer crushing. She thought of her paintings, her growing online following, the apartment she'd rented near the coast. I'm building something new. The thought was a flame, small but fierce, lighting her path. Grace's hand brushed hers, a silent promise, and Clara felt the city's pulse align with her own. She was leaving again, not in flight but in triumph, her heart a compass pointing toward a life she'd only begun to claim. The gallery's white walls glowed under soft lights, a canvas of possibility where Clara's paintings hung like windows to her soul. It was her 67th birthday, and the room buzzed with strangers, their murmurs a quiet tide of awe. Her seascapes dominated, tempestuous waves, bruised skies, streaks of gold piercing the chaos, each brushstroke a testament to her reclaimed voice. Clara stood near a corner, her fingers tracing the rim of a wineglass, her heart a drumbeat of pride and disbelief. This is mine. The thought was a beacon, steadying her against the surreal weight of the moment. Her simple navy dress felt like armor, her gray hair swept into a loose bun, her eyes bright with a fire she'd thought long extinguished. The cancer was still there, a shadow in her body, but tonight, she was more than her illness, she was an artist, reborn. Her online art account had exploded in the months since her return to the coast. What began as a whim, posting watercolors from her balcony, had grown into a movement. Followers shared her work, galleries reached out, and now, this exhibition. Clara moved among her paintings, her steps light, each canvas a milestone. One piece, a turbulent ocean under a fractured moon, drew a crowd. She overheard a critic murmur, raw, yet disciplined. She's a revelation. Her chest tightened, not with fear but with joy. She thought of her old life, ironing James's shirts, packing Daniel's lunches, and marveled at the distance she'd traveled. I was a ghost then. Her fingers brushed a canvas's edge, the texture grounding her. She was solid now, undeniable. Grace weaved through the crowd, her smile a spark of warmth. Clara, this is incredible, she said, her voice low, intimate. You're incredible. Clara's laugh was soft, almost shy. I still can't believe it's real. Grace squeezed her arm, her eyes fierce. It's real because you made it real. The words landed like a gift, unwrapping a truth Clara was only beginning to embrace. Grace had become her confidant, her cheerleader, helping her navigate hospital visits and lease agreements. Tonight, she was her anchor, grounding Clara in this glittering, unfamiliar world. A familiar voice broke the hum. Clara? It was Zach, her old art professor, his wild hair now white, his eyes crinkling with pride. I always knew you had this in you. He gestured to the paintings, his voice thick. You're fearless again. Clara's throat closed, memories flooding, late nights in the studio, his encouragement fueling her dreams. She hugged him, the embrace a bridge across decades. Thank you, she whispered, her voice cracking. His praise was a mirror, reflecting the artist she'd buried and now reclaimed. As Zach moved on, Clara's gaze lingered on her work, her heart swelling. This is who I am. The crowd parted, revealing Daniel and Leona near a painting of a stormy horizon. Their presence was a jolt, their faces a mix of awe and unease. Daniel approached, his suit impeccable, his smile strained. Mom, this is impressive, he said, the word careful, calculated. Leona nodded, her eyes darting away. Yeah, it's really something. Their compliments were hollow, laced with regret not for her pain but for their loss of control. Clara saw it in their postures, tense, guarded, as if she were a stranger who held their inheritance in her hands. They don't know me anymore. The realization was a quiet victory, freeing her from their expectations. She turned away, her attention caught by Olivia, a gallery curator who'd championed her work. Clara, we're getting offers already, Olivia said, her eyes gleaming. This could be the start of something big. Clara's breath caught, her mind racing. Partnerships, exhibitions, a life built on her terms, it was dizzying, intoxicating. She nodded, her voice steady. Let's talk tomorrow. Olivia grinned, and Clara felt a surge of power, not vengeance but clarity. She wasn't erasing her past, she was outgrowing it. As the evening waned, Clara stood alone, her paintings surrounding her like sentinels. The gallery was quieter now, the crowd thinning, but the air still thrummed with energy. She thought of her children, their guarded admiration, and felt no anger, only peace. I don't need their approval. The thought was a melody, soft but resolute. Her eyes traced the lines of her favorite canvas, a sea in turmoil, its heart alight with hope. This was her truth, painted in bold strokes, and it was enough. She closed her eyes, the gallery's hum fading, and let herself rest in the silence of her own fulfillment, a woman whole at last. The hospital room was a sterile cocoon, its walls a pale green that seemed to absorb sound and hope alike. Clara sat by the window, her sketchbook open on her lap, her pencil tracing the curve of a distant wave. The foreline in her arm was a quiet tether, delivering treatment with a steady drip, but her spirit roamed free, untamed by the clinical hum. Outside, the coastal city glittered under a winter sky, its horizon a promise she now held close. Her art exhibition had been a triumph, her paintings selling to collectors, her name whispered in galleries. Yet here, in this antiseptic space, her family had come to reclaim her, their voices a storm she no longer feared. Clara's fingers tightened on the pencil, her gaze steady. I'm not theirs to take. The door swung open, and James entered, his face etched with a practiced remorse that didn't reach his eyes. Behind him, Daniel, Anna, and Leona hovered, their postures a mix of defiance and unease. Clara's heart flickered, not with pain but with recognition. They were here not for her, but for what they stood to lose. James cleared his throat, his voice soft, conciliatory. Clara, we need to talk. I'm sorry. For everything. The words were rehearsed, a lawyer's plea, but they fell flat, like coins on stone. Clara tilted her head, studying him. Too late. She set her sketchbook aside, her movements deliberate, each action a declaration of her sovereignty. You're sorry, she said, her voice calm, a blade wrapped in silk. For what, James? For Vivian? For the key? Or for never seeing me? Her words cut through the room, sharp and unyielding. James flinched, his hands clenching at his sides. Anna stepped forward, her eyes flashing. Mom, stop it. You're tearing us apart. Her voice cracked, but Clara saw the fear beneath, fear of losing the house, the money, the safety net Clara had built. Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice low. Think about the will, Mom. Don't do something you'll regret. The mention of inheritance was a raw nerve, exposing their priorities. Clara's laugh was soft, bitter, a sound that echoed her emancipation. This isn't about regret, she said. It's about me. My life. And I'm done letting you define it. Leona remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, her fingers twisting a bracelet. Clara saw the regret there, quiet but real, a flicker of the girl who'd once clung to her after ballet class. But it wasn't enough to pull Clara back. I've outgrown their need. The thought was a tide, washing away the last of her guilt. She turned to James, her voice steady. This divorce is between me and you. The children don't get a vote. The finality of her words was a door slamming shut, locking them out of her heart. The tension shattered as Grace burst into the room, her presence a gust of fresh air. Clara, you okay? She asked, her eyes narrowing at the family. She'd been in the hall, alerted by a nurse, and now stood like a sentinel, her loyalty fierce. Daniel bristled, his voice sharp. Who are you? Grace's smile was a challenge. I'm Clara's friend. The one who's here for her, not her money. The room stilled, Grace's words a mirror held to their greed. Clara's chest warmed, her gratitude for Grace a quiet flame. She reached for Grace's hand, the touch grounding her. I'm fine, she said, her voice soft but firm. They were just leaving. The family hesitated, their faces a gallery of shock and resentment. James tried once more, his voice low. Clara, please. We can fix this. But Clara's gaze was unyielding, her heart a fortress. You can't fix what you broke, she said, the words a requiem for their marriage. She turned to the window, dismissing them, her sketchbook calling her back. The family left, their footsteps fading, and the room felt lighter, cleansed. Grace lingered, her silence a comfort. You're stronger than they know, she said, her voice a whisper. Clara smiled, her eyes on the horizon. I'm stronger than I knew. Later, Clara walked alone by the sea, the winter air sharp against her skin. Her sketchbook was tucked under her arm, its pages filled with new dreams, canvases yet to be painted, cities yet to be explored. The waves crashed, their rhythm a song of resilience, and Clara felt it echo in her bones. She thought of her family, their desperate pleas, and felt no anger, only peace. I don't need their permission to be whole. The thought was a star, guiding her forward. She paused, her toes sinking into the sand, and opened her sketchbook to a blank page. Her pencil moved, tracing the outline of a woman by the sea, her silhouette bold against the sky. Clara smiled, her heart a canvas of her own making, and walked on, free at last.